Hello, everybody. My name is Steve, and I'm here with two awesome people. We're with EpicTalez and author Mike Shel, the author of Aching God, and we are reading the Iconoclast series, one book per month. And this is the first meetup for Aching God, the first book in the trilogy. So, Epic, do you want to give a quick introduction and tell us about your channel?
EpicTalez, you already know. I talk. My channel is all about stories, centered mostly around books, but also anime and animations and anything that has to do with storytelling. So yeah, I am so excited to get this conversation going because I absolutely love this book. Like, if you're a fan of grittier, grounded, like fantasy, epic fantasy, like the original fantasy books that like that made you love fantasy. That is what this book is. I am so excited to talk to Mike Shell today. And I'm gonna let him introduce himself.
Go
I
ahead,
am
Mike.
Mike Shel. I'm the author of the Iconoclasts trilogy, and I've done a good deal of writing for the Pathfinder role-playing game. Did that actually before I started writing novels. So
Hmm.
thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone for reading my book.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming along and chatting with us about it.
Thank you for writing the book to start with.
Well, that too, yeah.
You're
And
Well,
like,
welcome.
thank
what aspects of like your experience working with Pathfinder, like what could you be specific in the aspects of like working with Pathfinder influenced your prose and like how you unfold stories.
I don't know that it necessarily influenced my prose. It influenced my understanding of constructing a story
Hmm.
and kind of structuring a story. And it certainly, obviously, flavored the nature of the story that I was telling. You know, I had always been kind of fascinated by kind of a classic D&D setup where people are crawling into old tombs and whatnot, and but wanting to ground that kind of in the real world. And so much fantasy, these things, people are attacked by shambling undead and, enormous dragons, and they just shrug it off afterwards. And it was, well, this is also informed by what I do for my day job, but, I just think that that's kind of stuff would be traumatizing. And so, I was really wanting to work toward a world that felt real and grounded in some kind of, I guess, reality. Is what I'm looking at. So the Pathfinder helped kind of make me think a lot about how would magic work in a real setting. How, certainly the government's going to have its fingers in it. They're not going to let people go off and do magic all on their own. There's going to be some desire for the government to control it. And how does that work? What does that do to innovation? And I would think that having access to magic would prevent a lot of innovation. Always so much fantasy that we read seems to be stuck in kind of a medieval or maybe Renaissance kind of a setting, technology wise. And having been that way for hundreds of thousands of years, and I would think, yeah, maybe magic would kind of keep innovation from happening, technological innovation, because we just we can just flip a magic switch to make it happen. So
Hmm.
it was a very rambling and not on target answer to your question.
That's
Yeah,
perfect.
but then you touched on some other things I wanted to ask you about. So after the live stream ended the last time we spoke, you mentioned how like how your work in psychology and like everything like mental illness and everything, how that kind of influenced your like how you shaped your characters and how their reactions and everything. You mentioned you didn't like you mentioned you didn't like the thing where, or rather you observed like when a dragon comes and like the characters are not reacting like emotionally appropriate as far as like the, the real world is concerned. Like how like I noticed that a lot with your characters in the book, and like I loved it. I loved how your characters were grounded. They did not feel like out of reach emotionally. Like I did not have to I did not have to switch to fantasy mode of understanding things to like flow with it. You know what I mean? Like it was so real. And then oh my god, like the way you unfolded the story, like talking about Oryx's dreams that basically informing you about the Barrowlands, as well as like talking about his PTSD. And it was just so brilliant, so brilliant. Like even when they were on the like I was not bored at any point. I was not like I did not want to stop to do something else for a few minutes before I continued. I just wanted to keep going, but I had to pace myself because this was supposed to be last week, and I was like, and then we were like, we're gonna move it this week, so I stopped reading it, and then I started reading more of it like a couple days ago. But I could really see how like your understanding of psychology influenced your characters, and I really enjoyed that aspect.
Thank you. My specific area of expertise as a psychotherapist is anxiety and panic. You know, I obviously work with people with all sorts of issues coming through, but that's my specialty. And so, you know, having had a lot of experience with people with trauma histories and maladaptive anxiety responses, I think that you know, they say write what you know. So I know about this stuff. So that was one of the things that was really fun to weave in. And I actually, I probably the first draft, first or second draft, hadn't pushed it as much as I did. But another a writer that I know, Tamandra Whitecastle, read it, and she said, you know, she pointed out, for instance, at the point everyone's read it. Is there actually anyone other than the three of us here right now? Do we know?
There's a few people watching. Yeah.
Okay.
Let us know in the chat. Spoilers are incoming.
I assume everyone's read it. So the point when they have to amputate Sierra's leg, Tim said, that's a perfect opportunity to do flashback. And I thought, well, maybe that's too much. I had kind of backed off a little bit because I didn't want to do too much. But she said, no, go for it. You need to punch this up some more. So it was thanks to her and some other feedback I got from some other writers that I pushed it a little more than I had originally.
And I'm glad like you got that advice, because like I really enjoyed that aspect. Like it really it was like, so to talk about like his experience in the Barrowlands, and like to talk about that experience and not show like like how it affected him afterwards, would have not like it would have taken something very important in the book that I enjoyed a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, it was something that was really important to me. I thought, you know, the book that I wrote was a book that I know I would like to read, and wanted to see those kinds of things portrayed. So I'm glad that did come through.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Epic said about not being bored. I was never kind of waiting for something to happen. I thought it was pretty steady the whole way through. I didn't think there was any dips, or the story was always moving along. There was always something happening, and I was always interested in what was going to come next. So
I'm glad to hear that.
Guys, this is a masterpiece. Like, no kidding. Like, this is a masterpiece. It has my highest praise, and I'm not just saying it because it's here, because he's here. Like, I was talking to Steve before they started, and I was just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I really, really enjoyed the book. This is the kind of stuff I like. And yes, I also like how, like, descriptive you were with, like, the gory aspects of the book. Like, I was really there. I was really there. And you know, like how you were telling the story of every time he woke up from the dream, I was like, damn it, I wanted more. But then I was happy he woke up, because I'm like, okay, the movie is moving. The I said the movie, it played in my head like a movie, but like the book is moving in this direction as well. And just like how you, something else I really, really enjoyed about the book was the dialogue. Oh my God. Like, the dialogue was so well written, like, and in just like and just like how each of the characters communicated, I really like, it was so well written, like. And like so like when you're writing dialogue, right, you have to put yourself, and I'm talking like as an aspiring writer, you have to put yourself in the person's mind, and like how would they say this, how would this character react to this, like. And everything was so well done, like how, like, did you do anything, and this is your first book too, so like what did you do to improve your dialogue specifically, if like when you're writing?
Um, I had a more serious outline for this book than I did for the following two books.
Hmm.
But one of the things that I learned along the way is to let characters do what they want to do. I'd always, you'd heard things about how, oh, well, this was what was going to happen in the story. And then this character just wouldn't let me, or this character, I always thought that was, yeah, pretentious bullshit, that come on, you plan, you did this. But I really experienced that in the course of writing this. It's like, and that happened very much in dialogue, just kind of trying to put myself in the shoes of the people who are in conversation with one another. And, again, remember that a big part of my job is all about dialogue, right? And conversation between people, and empathy, and trying to understand things from another person's perspective. So I think it's something that it just felt like it was happening as I wrote it, and I didn't worry too much about, I got to wrap this shit up right there. We got to get to the next thing. I just kind of let that happen, and I think that's what built some of the characters in my mind.
So like, did you revise over it a lot? Like, did you revise over, like, how much did you change? How much was different from, like, from your first draft to like your final draft? Like, in terms of just because I feel like the dialogue was very well done, and the way you used it to unveil information about the world and this, like, what was going on, and everything was so well done. Like, did you revise it after, like, was that just like your first go, or like did you?
I couldn't tell you, Epic. I mean, I mean, I wrote the first draft of this book in 10 weeks, 132,000 words in 10 weeks. Now this is from someone who, for my entire life, started trying to write, when I was 13 or 14 years old. I've never been able to get past 20, 30 pages, and just getting bogged down in going back and editing over and over and over again, until everything had been squeezed. All the happiness and inspiration was squeezed out of the thing. And so this was the first time I had ever it just all came pouring out. Every time I sat down to write, it would be, I'd write 2,500 words, which was fantastic. But then I sat on it I didn't sit on it. I continued to tinker with it then for months afterwards, probably about a year. because first I wasn't sure which direction I was going to go with whether I was going to try to pursue a traditional publishing deal, or if I was going to self-publish, and what that would take. And so it went through iterations. There's only one major change to the plot. Little things were added in here and there, and I tightened up some things and put a little bit more when I felt like something needed to be more clearly explained. But I think probably the bulk of it was really just spat out in that 10 weeks. So I thought then that that's the way people write books now. So I was expecting the next two to be the same story in it, and they were not at all.
So before, because I feel like I've just been gushing so far. But first of all, I 100% agree with Andrew. Like, Auric is such a good character. Auric is such a good character, and like, shout out to Andrew as well. He was the one that recommended this book to me a long time ago before he even did a review for it, and I kept like pushing. I was like, okay, I'll read it. But like, I am so glad he recommended it to me, and like, I read it now. Insta 5/5, man. This guy knows what he's talking about. Like, like. So just give me, yeah. So concerning Auric, right? Like, I know you told me the first time that I don't know if it was, we said it during while we're during the previous live stream or after the live stream ended, but you told me that you said some traditional publishers didn't want to publish your book because, like, they said Auric was too good of a character.
The feedback I got, which I think was excellent feedback, was that a New York publisher, which at the time meant a Big Five publisher, is not going to be interested in this title because Auric is too nice.
Auric is too nice. I feel like he was really good, surprising. But I didn't think he was too nice. I think he was a good character, and like, I didn't think he was too nice. I thought he was grounded. So there was none of because there's a thing where in fantasy books or in books in general where they kind of like elevate the main characters to like Christ level, to like a level where like it's just like nobody actually is this good. And it's like I can't really empathize with a character that doesn't really have like a dark side that is tangible, but like the thing with Auric was that Auric was so grounded that like I didn't find myself minding that he wasn't like an anti-hero, or like I just enjoyed him. And then the moments he had even towards the ending of the book where he was like, oh, now I have this cool sword and I'm not afraid of you. You know the scene I'm talking about? Like that was like I felt it, like I was experiencing that kind of thing for the first time, because I was not I completely empathized. I was completely lost in the character. So I agree with Andrew. Like Auric is so well written, and not just Auric. All the other characters were so good. Although I didn't like when this person died. But anyway, I feel like I've been gushing too much. Let me let Steve guide the conversation. But like, yeah.
No, as we can, it's an open floor. Don't worry about that, Epic. I just want to get back to. So Boiled Jellyfish is an instant 5/5, and Andrew had a question about what made you choose Simon Vance as the narrator of the audio. He adds so much depth to the already great story.
Actually, I thought he was asking if I had goosed Simon Vance.
Oh,
but yeah, choose. That makes more sense, doesn't it? Well, what happened the week that Aching God came out, it made a little bit of a splash, and that was 100% due to the fact that there were a few other established self-published authors who had gotten me hooked up with some of their beta readers. So I got, like, I think there were a good 30 reviews published within the first couple of days for people who had read the book, before it had been released. So it had some ratings and it got some traction. It didn't, tear up the world by any stretch of the imagination, but it got some attention. And during that time, Phil Tucker, who is one of those self-published authors, who's a friend of mine who helped out with beta readers, put a bug in Victoria Gherkin's ear at Podium and said, "Hey, I think this is a really great book, and it would make a great audiobook." And so that first week, I got approached by Victoria from Podium, and at this point, my hope is that I'm maybe by the end of the year. It got released in April, I think. Maybe by the end of the year, I will have made my money back and what I paid for an editor and artwork and all that other stuff. The idea of being approached by a company like Podium to produce, and have a real professional do the book. I mean, that was, I didn't even dream of that happening. And she asked me who I'd like to have as a narrator. And I said, well, Simon Vance or Derek Perkins would be awful nice. She said, just whoever you want, just whatever, Yeah, I think the first thing I said was Mark Rylance, because he was the actor who portrayed not Oliver Cromwell, the other Cromwell, Thomas Cromwell, in Wolf Hall and Masterpiece Theater adaptation. And that's who I saw as Orc. And so originally I said, well, okay, Mark Rylance. Okay, so she said, okay, let's come down a little bit. So, superstar like Simon Vance, who's just, I mean, his narration elevates my prose.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Elevates my prose in a way that just, I couldn't be happier. It's just a brilliant performance. So I asked Victoria and they said, they got him. And the way it works, generally speaking, for voice actors, is when you sign on for a book, it's more or less expected that you're on for the long haul for the trilogy. So it was like I knew that that Simon would be locked in for the rest of the trilogy. So when I heard the first one, it was like, even just listen to this sample. It's like, this is amazing. This is a dream come true. So, yeah, I got super lucky. I shot for the moon and hit. So, super lucky.
Got to take your shot sometimes.
Yeah.
And Strange Mentality paper says just downloaded this on Kindle Unlimited. So that's awesome.
Yeah, by the way, Strange Mentality paper is like an upcoming writer. Like, she had this short story I read yesterday. It was really good. Just the quality of the writing itself, and I was glad to meet her, and just shouting her out.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, and Andrew blames his phone for the typos, but we know better.
Yeah. I actually suck at spelling, man. Like, that's like my nemesis right now. The writing, it's just like I just keep going. I can't, like, once I'm like, that doesn't look right, I'm just like, let me just keep writing.
David mentioned the covers. I should also say that these are not the Aching God cover is not the original cover. The original cover that I paid for was universally panned as not a good cover. And one of the things that Podium did when Victoria very politely said, "Do you mind if we play around a little bit with a cover?" And so it's Alexander Rito, who works for Podium and doing covers, went ahead and did the audiobook cover and then expanded that into a digital and print version as well. So he's responsible for all 3 of these covers.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah.
And Brandon Bennett says adding Aching God to his TBR for sure.
David, sir, you're going to love this book.
Yeah.
It's so
I'm
dark.
not afraid to do any spoilers.
It's so dark. It's so dark. Like, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it yet, but like, god damn it, man. God damn it. Like, it is if you love grimdark, you're not afraid of like thing, it's like crazy. If you're not afraid of guts, you're not afraid of like darker aspect. Like like you know what I like. There was something when Auric was before Auric like got into action in the present moment. I was kind of like, how is this guy going to fare in battle? Because like I was imagining a scene in my head where like during battle he has like a moment he had like when he was trying to amputate the leg, but then like what I like the way things played out with the sword, and it's just like, yeah, it's just like there's a lot I can learn from your writing. And for anyone out there that like is doesn't really rate self-publishing like books like highly, this book is really really good. This book can stand up to any book out there. But
I have a whole shelf here of self-published stuff by authors that are awesome. That there is a renaissance of fantasy, I think, going on right now, and a lot of it I think is in the self-published realm, because there are, I think that in a lot of ways the traditional houses are behind the curve with a lot of new things happening, new voices. They've certainly started to try to get some writers of color right with fantasy in, but there are a lot that I think someone like where is the book? Evan Winter's Rage of Dragons. That was self-published originally, and it's a brilliant book. He's an incredibly gifted writer. It's no surprise that once the trad houses saw what this man was capable of, that they snarfed him up right away. But I mentioned Tamandra White Castle. I love her work. The Living Blade trilogy, and she's right now in the process of writing. I'm not sure if there's going to be another book or not. But Queens of the Weird is a Viking's mom story that is a Viking mom's going on an adventure, and it's an amazing book. It's just a beautiful, beautiful book. Shadows and Ivory by T.L. Greylock is the first in, I think, a planned trilogy that is essentially, the best way to describe it is female Indiana Jones in a kind of Renaissance fantasy setting. Just a blast. And she had also written a Norse-inspired trilogy prior to that too. That's excellent. So yeah, I could go on and on and on. Dirk Ashton's Paternus trilogy, Phil Tucker's. I should mention this because Phil Tucker had a 5-book series, the Chronicles of the Black Gate. Excellent series, and it has just been released in digital format, all 5 in one digital book for I think $5.99 maybe.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. So it's like,
wow.
and Phil is a really gifted writer. I've never met anyone who writes battle scenes better than Phil. So check that out. And I think he's got a new one coming out soon. Well, I know he's got a new one coming out soon. I think he's calling it Bastion. And I've actually got an advanced copy that I'm reading right now, and it's a blast. It's just a blast.
Mike, can I say something about you that I noticed like in the first time we messaged you, and this has nothing to do with books, but it's just like something I have noticed about you. Every time like I'm gushing and I'm throwing like light on you, you're always like sharing it, like mentioning this other writer, mentioning that other writer, mentioning who helped you, and that makes me appreciate you, not just as a writer but as a person. Like I noticed it the last time, and I'm noticing it again, and I'm going to check out those books simply because you mentioned them, and I'm going to I wrote some of their names, but then I stopped. I'll just watch this again, and I'll just like go down and check all of them out.
Well, I'm from the Midwest, and we're not supposed to get too big for our britches, so that might be a byproduct of that. And plus, just I mean, I have a lot of gratitude. I don't know if some of it comes from the fact that the first book was published when I was 53, 54. So I'm 57 now, and finally have gotten this trilogy out. Something that I had dreamed of for most of my life, and so I feel an enormous amount of gratitude, and I want to give shout outs to those people that helped me and to highlight brilliant work. Demi Harper's God of Gnomes. You must go and read it.
God of Gnomes.
Yes. By the way, she edited my first 2 books too. She edited Aching God and Sin Eater.
Okay.
Yeah, she's out of the editing game now, I think, because she's writing. So
wow.
Anyway.
You mentioned something very interesting to me. You said you did a lot less outlining. Well, not outlining. You did a lot less writing Sin Eater and Idols Fall. They were a lot less organized than when you were writing Aching God. So I really enjoyed like the pacing of the book and like the sequence of events and just like how you built everything pre-Bioland and like while things were in the Bioland. So how much outlining did you do for that? Like did you like was it like did you like sit down, think about it, and then write, okay, this is how it's going to start, and then this is what's going to happen next, and this is what's going to happen next? And if that's what you did, then like what did you do different in Sin Eater and Idols Fall?
I sat down and wrote the dream sequence at the beginning that opens the book, which because of course everyone tells you never start a story with a dream, right? And so of course that's what I do. But I wrote that dream sequence, and then I thought of kind of the course of the story, and I wrote a very maybe 3 or 4 sentences about this is what happens in this chapter. Then the next chapter, this is what happens in the next chapter. So that was my outline. There are a lot of other writers who are a lot more detailed in the outlines they write. But what I found happening is, I thought that I was going to be more of a plotter that would really kind of have things plotted out clearly. But then what I found happening is that this discovery was going on along the way. That sword wasn't in the original outline. It was in the first draft. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't even in the original outline. And it ended up becoming so central to the story. I mean, you see the sword on all 3 books, right? The covers of all 3 books has got that sword at its center. And it wasn't, and Sin Eater and Idols Fall didn't exist until I was about 2/3 of the way through the draft of my first draft of Aching God. And then I realized, okay, this story's bigger than I thought it was. And I ended up, some chapters ended up getting inserted where, okay, this needs to happen. That's going to require another chapter. So here and there, I just found things going in directions I didn't expect. One of the characters that I wrote for a throwaway scene in the before meeting the Queen, Auric bumps into an aristocrat and has a conversation with her, and that was it. That was supposed to be the end of the line for her as a character, and then she ended up poking her head into the next chapter when they actually meet the Queen, and she's one of the POV characters in the 3rd book. It's like this wasn't the plan at all, and it's so cool to see that happening. But that's of course when writing is flowing, and that's not the way things always are, as I found out in the next 2 books. So
the thing, like, first of all, how creepy was that Queen? Jesus.
Yeah.
She was so creepy. She was so
fun to write. My God, she was fun to write.
I enjoyed her as a character so much. And like how many more POVs did you add? Because if I remember correctly, it was just Oryx POV we had in this one mostly.
Right. Yeah. The
Although,
first book, it's almost. I think it's. I think it's almost exclusively. I think it's exclusively Oryx point of view.
Yeah, I think so.
okay, yeah,
In Sin Eater, there are actually 3 points of view.
okay,
I don't want to give away who one of them is because it kind of gives away what happens in this book. But Oric is as a point of view in the second book, and then we have another major character, and then this kind of mysterious side character who we're not really sure what his deal is until deep into Sin Eater. But his is the opening chapter, which I actually wrote immediately. That opening chapter, I wrote that for Sin Eater. I wrote immediately after I finished the first draft of Aching God because I knew this was going to. I'm on a roll. As part of me wishes that I just kept writing because there was a big. I don't know about other writers out there, but I have these horrific fallow periods after I finish a novel, and not after the draft is done, because that there's all sorts of editing and that keeps things rolling. But once it's done and it's published, it's like I can't write my way out of a paper bag for months sometimes. So I mentioned that Aching God, the first draft was done in 10 weeks. For Sin Eater, it took me 10 months to get the first draft done.
that is still fast compared to some other writers.
Yeah.
So like that's still very impressive. Like,
yeah. Well, keep in mind, I thought I was going to be writing 3 novels a year. At the 10 weeks here, 10 weeks there, 10 weeks there. I'll take a week off here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Strange Mentality Piper says, Mike, you should be a sports commentator. You have quite a great football announcer voice.
Thank you.
And
sorry, hockey is the only sport I care about. I'm afraid I couldn't do
that. Brandon Bennett says, Midwest represent, and Boiled Jellyfish. I try to get at least 10 self-published books in a year.
Yes, I'm really I'm really starting to incline towards more self-published indie author type stuff than traditional published, because I don't know, a lot of the books that I read growing up were traditionally published, and depending on the year that the book was published, whether it's fantasy or it's sci-fi, I can kind of see what was like trending to like what the publishers were trying to push at that time. I can even make a video about it. But like with self-published and indie authors, what I'm finding is that sense of it's not even a thing of predictability, because a book can still be good if it's predictable, but that sense of just like an idea that is not like that isn't conventional, it could still be, you could still like be influenced by like all the books, the traditional books that you've read, but that freedom of writing, that freedom of just like, this is what is in your imagination and this is what I'm going to put out there, is something I'm starting to really, really enjoy about like indie and self-published books. And you spoke earlier about like the book having a life of its own, like when you were writing and everything. When I was reading, I felt it. And when I say that, like, I mean, like, I was completely immersed in the world. I was I was following. I don't remember having to because I listened to the audiobook. I don't remember having to rewind as much as I did with some other books to like follow what was going on. It just flowed in my head really well. I have a question about a particular event in the book. So, and this is like what was going through your mind when you did it, and I want to contrast it to a book I read where like they did some like from some set up for us to feel like the death of a character by like the character, like the character's parents, basically come to talk to him, tell them how proud of of him they are, and
Yeah,
like
he's a goner.
and then exactly he was a gunner. Like when Dell like hugged Oric and was like, oh, like my dad, all that stuff. Like I didn't like it- I was still shocked when it happened. Like I did not, even if it's like even if it's, I would say it's like a trend, it's like a way, it's like a setup to like what is going to happen. Like I didn't see what happened. Like I wasn't able to predict that. When it happened, I was still like, damn. And then I remembered, oh, that was when that is just to like put some more emotional weight
Yeah.
on that. So like how did you like do you like your masking of that was like, how intentional was that? And like did you put, like, if it was intentional, then like how did you execute that so well?
Um, I actually debated if that conversation needed to happen earlier, so it didn't feel like exactly as you described, like, oh, someone's gonna die as soon as you read that. Um, uh, but enough hadn't happened. More needed to happen in order for that conversation to occur. And the people were another thing. Some people complained about what went on at the White Priory, like, oh, politics, that's boring, and move along. We want to get to the dungeon, right? And I actually that's the kind of stuff fascinates me. That's why we spend so much time fiddling with that. But yeah, I decided that to leave that there. But yeah, I punched that up, knowing that she was a goner. So that was absolutely deliberate. And of the characters that almost all the other people in Orc's party are young people, right? Bellic is the only one who's is his age. But it felt to me that he and Dell had the most parent-child kind of relationship, because Sierra is really more of a confidant and an encourager, despite the fact that she's the youngest one in the group. And so it just made sense to kind of punch at the estrangement in Orc's relationship with his own daughter Agnes, who's is in a coma back in Bowden. So yeah, I some of this was trying to echo some of those relationship dynamics, and realizing that Orc feels a lot of guilt about where things are at with Agnes. So.
Wow. Like so usually when I'm reading a book, I am comparing, if I read a moment where like I am emotionally like affected, like whether I'm like, nah, this doesn't make sense, or I'm irritated, or I'm sad, or I'm like, damn, like really, I always if I pause in a book because of an emotional moment like that, I always pause to think, what were the intentions of the writer, and is it aligned with how I feel? Because when you're writing a book, you're basically trying to conduct the emotion of your readers, right? So and that's how I judge if writing is good. And a lot of the times, right, like I asked you that question because I didn't see the death coming, and when it happened, right, I was like, like I read it back again, and then just to like read it with that lens, and I was like, very good execution, very good execution. And
Yeah, well,
I was lost.
that shouldn't have happened when it did, right? I mean,
Sorry?
they weren't supposed to be in danger yet.
Yes,
So
that
I
was
think that's
another
probably
thing.
one of the reasons why it was. Yeah.
Yes, maybe yes. Actually, I didn't even think about that, because they were not supposed to be in danger, like stuff. It wasn't like, it was not something you would anticipate, you know. So like if it was okay, she said it and there was like a war the next day, then I'm like, ah, shit. You
Mm.
know. So like yeah, 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 like I'm telling, as a writer, like I've really like learned a lot just reading this book, because when I'm reading it, there's a part of my part that's just like a reading fan, and then there's the aspiring writer in me that's like, okay, like this is like, how did he do that? Okay, this payoff has already happened. Now let me look back at the execution and the setups that were like laid down.
Mhm.
Because, so it's like, yeah, like I really enjoy. And let me not talk, like, yes, good execution.
Thank you.
And Epic, you mentioned the dialogue, and that's something with. And when I hear this book described as epic fantasy, when I think of epic fantasy, I kind of think as cheesy dialogue and really predictable. And that did not feel like an epic fantasy to me. Because when I think of epic fantasy, I think eye rolling dialogue and this black and white type of good and bad thing. Like really, everything's really clear, and there's good guys and there's bad guys. But I didn't feel that way at all in this book. I felt the dialogue wasn't predictable. There was no eye rolling on my part, so it was really well done on the dialogue.
Hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, when I think of categorize it, I really see it more as dark fantasy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's an epic quality of some of the story, and certainly as the story continues, I think it becomes more epic. This you know, Aching God, I think, is can be seen as a self-contained novel. I think people can safely read this, and I think they'll have a satisfying ending, right? And set it down. They don't need to read anymore if they don't want to. And it builds beyond. But I see it more as dark fantasy and not as grim dark, because the way that I think of grim dark is no good deed goes unpunished. Is basically what grim dark is, right? And I want there to be. Oric was written as an unmitigated good guy. He's a good man trying to do his best. He doesn't always succeed, but he's doing his best to be a good man and to grow and to be a source of good in the world. And that doesn't always lead to disaster.
So for me, right, what I like about Grimdark is that it makes fun. It's like, it was a genre of fantasy that kinds of makes fun of the tropes. There's no plot armor, there's no, and that is what I appreciate about it, right? And you describe it as no good deed comes to, like, no good deed goes unpunished. For me, right, it's like it feels grounded. So if you're trying to make fun of the fantasy trope where there are armor plots, and you're keeping it grounded, then I don't want you to feel just because someone sounds heroic means like when they lunge at the dragon isn't just going to swallow them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So so even like, so with Aching God, I felt, even like, it's dark fantasy, right? But I felt that groundedness with the character. He wasn't like, there's sometimes when you're reading some fantasy books, you get the sense that the writer is writing like some scenes to show how good the character is, right? And sometimes is in contrast to a character, like you're pairing him up like against, maybe he's having an argument with someone that is supposed to be his superior, and the argument is, okay, let's kill everyone, that is like the greater good. And then this main protagonist comes and it's like, well, but we can't kill everyone, like, because positivity, and let's just hope. And that's not how stuff works, you know, like so that, first of all, is like there's dialogue that doesn't make sense. Then it's like the logic of the character, you can't empathize with it, but you're like, okay, he's good, so let's just go with that. Like, but with Auric, he was so grounded, so grounded. And like, and I really like that I read this book, because I was able to actually pinpoint, because I had no problems with Auric as a character. I was able to pinpoint it. But that groundedness that is in Grimdark, I felt it here. But Auric is a good character, and I can see why it is dark fantasy and not grimdark. But the groundedness I enjoy in grimdark, I felt it here as well.
Okay.
Wow, that was long-winded. I feel like I could have said that in like, see, this is why this is how
But
my
this is what
writing
happens
is.
when you hang out with me. You know, long rambling. Yeah.
But
And
like,
there's
yeah,
vulnerability there too in Yorick.
yes, and it's
You know, you don't really
realistic.
find it. Yeah.
It's realistic. He's not written as a Christ type of character. He's not written like as flawed. He has like, and his flaws aren't just that. Like sometimes, like sometimes when you're reading a book, right, it feels so mechanic. It's like, okay, I want a good character, but let me put flaws so that I can balance him. No, like that's not how it is. Like the flaws have to feel natural as well. You know what I mean? And like just like him having his PTSD, and I feel like the psychological impact of his experiences in the past and how they were playing in the future also, it was something that also grounded him so much as well. And yes, like it's there are so many positive things about this book that I really really appreciated when I was reading it.
Thank you.
And Mike, have you thought about writing a horror book? Because these nightmare sequences were
They were so
fantastic.
graphic.
They're
They
so
were
great.
so describing the sucking sounds, and oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that all three books have a reasonably strong horror element
Mhm.
to them. And again, I wanted to punch up the fact that shambling animated corpses are horrifying. We're not just, we don't just walk on from that. That's something that scars us, and so I think that I love horror. I've read a lot of horror, and I mean, people probably can feel the kind of Lovecraftian vibe in Aching God, and I'm a huge read just about everything Stephen King's ever written, and Laird Barron, and some other folks that I read. I love horror, so I think I think there's a decent amount woven into this. I think there's part of me that thinks if I'm going to write a horror story, it needs to be in the present day. I'm not sure why, and that intimidates me. I like to be able to create my own world where I don't have to worry about as much about the way
Rules.
the modern world. Yeah,
The rules of the modern world. Yeah.
rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Wow. Like there was something I was holding on to. I wanted to ask you. Let me see, what was it? I can't remember what it is. But with your like what books, right? I know you mentioned Stephen King, you mentioned Lovecraft, you mentioned like all these guys that you've read, like horror and everything. But like what books specifically inspired this one?
That's a good question.
I think a lot of it came from my experience playing writing for RPG and playing an RPG, and my work with people with panic and trauma. In terms of and also, I mean, I think I was influenced by writers like Michael Moorcock and Gene Wolfe. I think is a book of the New Sun is. I love Book of the New Sun. People find the prose a little impenetrable, I think. You have to have a lot of patience because he's also using a lot of archaic terms, and sometimes you can get lost in that. But I see that as a pretty serious influence on what I do. So yeah, I would say that Fritz Leiber's stuff I think was influence as well. So
Yeah,
some
could you
old school fantasy, I think.
yeah. Could you remind me, like you're also like an avid reader of like history and everything. What time periods influenced like this? Because you met the last time, I don't know if it was on screen or before
Right.
screen or after screen, but like what?
My interest in history started when I was a teenager. I really got fascinated with late Republican and early Roman history, and I got a whole shelf over here of all Roman history books. But that branched off into other eras. The Italian Renaissance in the last 10 years has been a big interest of mine. Tudor England. The American Civil War, feudal Japan. Those are the big eras that I've been most fascinated with. This if you really want something that's going to curl your hair, read the history of the papacy.
The papacy?
The papacy, the Catholic Church hierarchy.
Oh,
Yeah,
I've read a
Woo!
little. I've read a little bit of that. Now, my next question is like your take on religion in the book was very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I like how you're able to write like religion from like multiple perspectives. So like from the perspective of the zealot, from the perspective of someone who doesn't believe, the perspective of a scientist. I like how everything is just mixed in there, and like I can see like different parts of myself in each of them.
Yeah, I was once a person of faith, a much stronger person of faith, and I'm no longer. But I certainly have a lot of empathy for people of faith, and certainly support people in their beliefs if it helps them to live healthy, good lives. So that stuff, but despite the fact that I'm no longer a person of faith, that stuff still really fascinates me, and how it impacts cultures, how it impacts people in the behavior of individual people. Our beliefs guide a lot of the choices that we make. So I think that if there are gods in the world that really are, we can tangibly see their impact on the world, right? An atheist in Aching God is someone who just doesn't believe that the gods really give a rip. That they're doing their own thing, and all this, this worship thing is, it's a waste of time. So it's not that they disbelieve in the existence of gods. I think they disbelieve that the gods have any real interest in humanity.
That's like agnostic belief. That's an agnostic belief.
Yeah. When you think of the alchemist Lumari, she's definitely someone who's like, I don't have time for this in my life. I've got other things. I got bigger fish to fry than trying to figure out what the gods want.
I know. I love when she told the old blind guy, "Yo, stop speaking in riddles, man. Give it to us straight." I don't have time for it, And when what's his face? Auric was describing his relationship with religion, and she was basically rolling her eyes at him, like, "Yeah, right." Because like his actions and his words were not quite like in line with her understanding of what a true agnostic is.
Yeah.
See, just nuances that I just really enjoyed. What were you saying?
Oh no, sorry. I was just going to say that the buildup was one of my favorite parts of the book, because all this buildup of what's going to happen, what are we going to find there? We need to find out what these other people experienced, and why are all these things happening. That was my favorite part of the book, is the buildup, because it wasn't just, okay, let's go there and be heroes. It was, this is, you felt their anxiety and their fear as we got closer every step of the way.
Yeah, and that's again, and you know, to each his own. You know, and this is not going to connect with everybody, right? But people who had complaints were about, you know, why did it take so long for us to get to that? You know, they saying that, you know, boy, they don't even get into the dungeon until 85% of the way through this book. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to write 600 pages about crawling around in the dark. I mean, that doesn't strike me as particularly interesting. I'm more interested in the lore behind it and the politics involved in getting there, and really kind of the anticipation. And that was a big point of some of this, is it was building toward what's going on here. And some people have also seen some of the ending as anticlimactic, right? That there was an expectation of something bigger happening. And also complaining about it, kind of you know, what's the Deus Ex Machina? How they just got this sword popped in that was exactly what they needed. That's just a little too neat, you know, and you know, keep reading.
You know, you know something I know like the build up was good, but I feel like it was not just the build up. Like it was not just the moments that kept you asking what is going on in this world, but also how you were unveiling the information. Now, I have no problem with that because like for me, like I was well cooked. Like by the time I was like ready, I did not have a problem with the pacing at all. I didn't have a problem with it, and I kind of suspected that like the sword didn't just pop out of it, didn't just pop out for popping out sake, just like just exactly what you needed, you know. Like if I have to guess, you know, like and don't tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but I would say the first time he went to the Barrowland, like he was actually marked. You know, he was actually marked, and when he came out, like, and everything, like the thing was still kind of haunting him. So it wasn't. It was kind of like set up for him to not set up, but like there was like a bigger hand like controlling the events as far as like because why would like the duke that gave it to him was kind of like going crazy, you know. It could have been like an effect of the sword, and trying to find like its rightful like the person to wield it, and it's kind of like connected to like the fact that Auric was in the Barland before, and some kind of like weird connection here and there. But like I did not like I trust the way you unveiled information and the way everything else happened in the book. I already trust you as a writer to like I didn't even think of it as a problem. You know, I just kept reading. You know. So
I
you
think,
said
yeah.
yeah.
Just really quick. One thing, Epic, I know you'll agree with me on, is that there were no info dumps. I
There
didn't
were
feel
no
like there
info
was ever
dumps.
an info dump. So that's
Not
There were,
everyone agrees with you.
no, 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 no.
Uninformed at all.
There was exposition, but no, it wasn't. I won't call it an info dump.
Yeah.
An info dump is like just like you just throwing up like information, and then to a certain level, this is where it's needed to, and you just keep piling up upon it, and then like you're in the meantime you're out of your characters. And now the people that say that haven't read enough books to make that comment. Like, are you kidding me? Like but my point is no this because it's and so you said you were not going to write like you said you were not going to write like a 600-page book, like where it's that is just like crawling in the dark and everything. So did you have like an idea of how large you wanted the book to be? Like, did you have like a workout? Did you say I wanted so like at
No idea. I know it became as long as it did big
hmm,
to tell the story. So yeah, I had no idea. Again, this is my first novel. Who knows how long these things are supposed to be. And I know fantasy books tend to be thicker, but I think they tend to be thicker because you're building a world in a way that in a lot of other fiction, you don't have the same level of responsibility, right, for creating the entire world around it.
And something else. I feel like for the people that didn't appreciate how long all that, maybe an advantage I have was because I read Barrowland. Because in Barrowland, okay, would it be counted as a spoiler to Steve? You know what? I won't talk about it. But there were questions that I wanted answers to there that I got in this book. But in this book tells you what happened. Barrowland showed you what happened. Showed you at least right. Okay.
What I would really recommend, Steve, what you should do right now is pick up the Lost Lore collection of short stories, Lost Lore. And there's a story in there. The story Epic's referring to is in there. It's free. So it won't cost you a dime. Barrowlands is essentially a prequel story. It's about 10,000 words.
Yeah.
And there are one of the characters is never named in the story. But it'd be interesting to see what your experience would be of Barrowlands having read Aching God, because that's originally what I'd originally written Barrowlands as a
prologue.
No, as actually a teaser, get people to sign up for a newsletter. To get people to sign up for my newsletter, and then this opportunity came to get it in this anthology. Incidentally, there's a ton of other great self-published authors in that Lost Lore anthology. But it'd be interesting for people who've read Aching God to then pick up Barrowlands and what their experience is of that. I'd be interested, because Epic came at it by having read Barrowlands first.
Yeah.
And
I know you were advising we read Aching God first. Why? Because I feel like I kind of I don't know if because when I read the effect reading Barrowlands first had on me was that the dreams were a lot more interesting. Because in my mind I was like, okay, right, so so it's like but why did you want people to read Aching God first? Because I know you said
maybe because that's how they were written. I wrote Aching God first, and then Barrowlands came afterwards. And because I wanted to answer some questions for people of what did it look like. And I don't want to give any more away about that. I mean, I think, read Barrowlands. And incidentally, it's available as an audiobook too, with Simon Vance doing it.
Steve, the audiobook is like an hour.
Yeah, about an hour.
Yeah, it's not like you can do it you can read it like that.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd want to spend a whole credit on an hour, but Simon Vance is awesome, man. He does a great job with the short story too.
As you guys were talking, I just got the Kindle version, so
nice.
There you go.
Yeah,
Nice.
and then what I'll have you do then, after you guys read Sin Eater, I'm going to have you read a short story. I would have you read a short story in another collection called Heroes Wanted. Also, digital version is free, and the story in that is Final Word, and it is a character from Aching God who makes an appearance again in Idle's Fall.
A fantasy anthology.
Yes,
Heroes Wanted.
Yeah, and I'll post all the links here when we're done.
Yeah.
I was very I was very, like I liked each and every one of the characters that went on the journey, like at the start. And yeah, like I was not disappointed in a critic kind of way, but like disappointed when like one of them turned out to be like betrayer. Like when
Mhm.
I forget their names, but like when that dude
Mm.
betrayed like the crew, I found him hilarious. I found him absolutely hilarious, and there was a story he didn't tell, but like the way you describe it, he just told like the premise of the story and then the time skip and everyone was laughing. And
Mhm.
I was hoping you could tell us with the story if you ever wrote it.
My guess is that his story is bullshit. That it
Yeah, of
didn't
course, of
happen,
course, of
right?
course. I think it
But
had something to do with like he said he had to kill two of the giants and seduce another or something like that.
Yeah.
yeah,
And I was just like, what?
yeah. I mean, actually, right now I am. I like I said, I'm in one of those fallow periods now. After I've hardly done any writing since Idle's Fall, um, but I've been doing a lot of planning, and I actually am and considering I had this sequel trilogy that takes place 200 years after the events of Iconoclasts in my head. That I will eventually write it. But I'm wondering, I might be turning to writing a short story collection that is
Oh, cool.
an Iconoclasts collection. So both Barrowlands and Final Word will be included in it, but a number of other stories that either are referred to in Iconoclasts or gives us some more background on some things. I have what it might probably would be a novella set in Azkaea, uh, the Empire of Hanifax's traditional enemy, Eastern enemy. I've got and a couple of other things. I think that there's a mention of the tale of Dr. Phryxes not just being a stage play, that it was a real thing that happened. That another short story that I plan on writing. So I might be doing a collection of short stories, and the tentative title of it Epic will probably appreciate it since he's read Barrowlands, but the collection would be called Hold Tight, My Beloved.
I think I know what it's. I think I know what it is. I don't want to spoil it for Steve. But
Yeah.
a question. So I know that like anyone who reads Aching God and loves it as much as I do, or like loves the book, is gonna want to read Sin Eater. Now, Aching God, right, has one POV, right, and the character work is absolutely insane. Like, um I've read another book, Blood Song. I don't know if you read it, but that's a really
Anthony
good book.
Ryan. Yeah, really good
Anthony
book.
Ryan, Blood Song is a really good book, and he also had one POV, and he wrote one of like the most badass characters in fantasy, as far as I'm concerned. You know, um, in the next book, he had multiple POVs. And even if the character work was still very good on each of those POVs, a lot of his readers complained that they missed it when it was just like the main character, because just like switching things up like that was jarring. I already like the fact that you said you did less planning. I like when you did less planning, which is like a good direction. But something Anthony Ryan also did in his second book is that he did a lot more planning, a lot more plotting, in contrast to the first book that was just very character based. So, like,
Mhm.
have you gotten any complaints about Sin Eater like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Mm.
um, yeah, some people really enjoyed spending an entire book in one person's head, and there are certainly advantages to telling a story that way. And the Aching God, I think that was the way that needed to be told. But the rest of the series is bigger than Auric,
Hmm.
and his point of view wouldn't be sufficient to tell this story.
Hmm.
Um, so part of the thing when you get criticism of a book, some of it you take with a grain of salt. part I take with a grain of salt is the contradictory feedback. Like I have people who praise the characters, and just get feeling like they were very well written, really got to know these people. And then other people saying who read Aching God who said that, Auric was the only character you really find out anything about. Everyone else is a two-dimensional, caricature. And so when you get feedback for both things, you look at that and you're not really sure what to do with it. And the conclusion I've come to with some of this is that some of this stuff is just not gonna. Some people are gonna bounce off of it, and there's nothing I can do about that. And it's got to be okay. For those who have been disappointed in just the Auric-centric kind of story, that's because they have reacted, I think, to the other major voice in the second book, that it's a very different character, and again, it would be a spoiler to say who it is, but people say they found this character annoying or immature, and it's like, well, yeah, the character isn't a 51-year-old knight. It's someone who's much younger than that and much less experienced, and still coming to grips with some things. Of course, you're going to find this person annoying at times. But there are a lot of people then who really resonate with hearing more voices and getting deeper into you get deeper into the politics and the religion of the world, and just kind of seeing where this thing is headed. So yeah, definitely some people complained about that. But I don't think I could have told Sin Eater the same way the Aching God was told. And Idol's Fall, there are even more points of view. And and there are some complaints about that. Right? And for me, it was like, it's just ramping up because the story is getting bigger.
It's a natural progression. It's a natural progression. It's like if you're going to expand the world, like you because you said you didn't even realize how big it was going to be until you finish Aching God. You're like, holy shit, it could get even bigger. And of course, like I think it's a very natural progression. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. It's just like it's good to know. It's good to know, because when I read Blood Song, like I got that feeling, like, and I was like, I still really liked the characters, but then I was by the end of the trilogy, I liked somebody else more than I liked Valen. Which after I read book one would have probably been impossible. But yeah, like I'm looking forward to reading. I'm really looking forward to reading the next couple of books. Now, there's something I find about trilogies, right? That I do not necessarily. I don't know how I feel about. So a lot of we are not on Idols 4 yet, but usually on the third book, right? There's okay, this is the last book. Everyone knows this is the last book. Everyone knows it's going to end, and then things become a lot more predictable, because you're in that mindset of, okay, now the writer is trying to like tie up all the plot ends, and then when that happens, it's easier to see the plot strings, easier to see the setups and everything. So is that something you are aware of when you were writing, or is that something you just like you just wrote the book?
What I've liked about this story is I think that there's some really surprising turns and twists that happen. In Aching God, the twists are about finding out what happened on that first expedition into the same place that they're going into, and that things happen very differently from what they, what their understanding was. the twists in Sin Eater and Idol's Fall, I think, are a little more epic in scale. And when I see someone saying, you know, it was predictable, my reaction is to say, really? This is what you predicted was going to happen? Because I sure as hell didn't know this was going to happen when I started writing it. So, you know, I had some ideas of where this was headed, and I knew the grand, you know, the grand resolution of this, what it was going to look like. I knew where the story was going. It's not, I don't want to give the impression that it was just this meandering, and I just had this sense it was going to be a trilogy. No, I knew what was going to happen in each book, in broad strokes. But a lot of the twists that ended up happening, no, that was a lot more organic. And I think that most people are going to be reasonably surprised by when they read the last full chapter of Idol's Fall. I don't think it's going to resolve the way people necessarily were expecting it to resolve. And you know, looking at where the characters started, and that's the other thing, and people talking about character arcs and who grows and who doesn't grow, and people have different opinions about that. And I think I'm old enough and I've been around long enough to be able to just say, you know, I have written these books, and they are released into the wild, and people are going to do with them and interpret them the way they will. And they'll say that, you know, I didn't even get to know any of these other characters. They're all two-dimensional. And other people will say, oh man, I really felt, you know, even though it was one point of view, I really felt like I got to know. Well, who's right? Well,
yeah. You know something I read in a book that like helped me like get the courage to even like start putting out my work and write a couple short stories here and there, is that it said something about like when you it doesn't matter what kind of art you're doing, like writing is an art by itself. So like I'll say it in context to writing. So once you write a book, you put it out there, it no longer belongs to you. It no longer belongs to you. It's like you can't really like your like the enjoyment of being an artist is not from it doesn't come from uh feedback. Validation is very good to get when you get it, but your fulfillment as a writer is when you're is when you're actually writing, you know. And a good mentality to have is that once I put it out there, it doesn't belong to me anymore, because everyone is going to everyone is going to come with their expectations, and everyone is going to come with they are going to probably imagine it different, you know. Their tastes are going to be different. So it's like I don't really care what like right. I don't read a book off like reviews on the internet where it's like, because there are some people that literally, like I told Steve the other day when I started my YouTube channel, a so-called friend of mine carried my YouTube channel and took it to a website and paid people. He actually gave people money to like drop hateful comments and dislike. So my first video was bad, 100%, but like it did not deserve the amount of hate it got. So I don't really like. I would get a review from. I choose my books based on who I trust. So I trust Steve, for instance. If Steve says this book is good, he tells me it's fantasy, he tells me it's grimdark. It's on my TBR, and it's high up my TBR, you know. So there are two things you said I'm really excited about. First of all, is that you said that you are surprised. Some people said it was predictable. Now, predictability is not even bad if it's executed well. You know, it's not bad if it's executed. That's first of all. And second of all, is that like the fact that you said you'll be surprised to see just read Aching God. Can't wait for the next one. Yo, man, I appreciate it, but something else is that the fact that you said even you're surprised that people saying it's predictable because of how you wrote it. So I'm actually even more curious to read it and see what how things resolve.
smart authors don't read their reviews, I'm sure. I'm not one of them. I'm not one of those people who wrote this and said, well, I understand on an intellectual level that, yes, this belongs to the world. I've released it into the wild, and I have to, I'm got to take the good with the bad. But I want to know, I wrote this because I want to share a story with people, right? I mean, the fact that I came on here today isn't all about ego. It's also, but I genuinely want to hear what people's experiences have been, and it's great if it's positive, but if people didn't hit them right, or for whatever reason, that they bounced off of it, that's okay. I mean, I mentioned some of the writers that I'm friends with who have given my stuff a try, and it's not for them. And yet I still respect their feedback. I still respect them as writers. They're still my friends. They're not, unnecessarily cruel or thoughtless about, feedback that might be painful to hear. I think of one person in particular who doesn't care for my stuff, who has given me excellent feedback that I think has really improved my writing. So I it's not that like all we need to get is praise. I want to hear people engaged with this. And if the books piss people off, or they don't like how something was done, that's okay. I mean, I'm willing to hear that. I'm fascinated. The fact that people have invested time and money in my words is an honor and a thrill. That we can't, there's no way to get around it. Some people are dicks. Yeah. And they will pronounce that this is a terrible book, and that is a fact. It's not my opinion, it's a fact. And people of good taste will not enjoy this. I mean, what you were talking about, Epic, is the fact that Steve is someone who has judgment that you trust.
Yes.
He says something is worth your time. Okay, I know what Steve steered me toward in the past. I trust him. Right? We have similar feelings about this. I've got other writer friends who love my stuff. Right? And that feels good. It's great to get affirmation. We need it. This is such a solitary activity. Writing is so solitary in so many ways. The opportunity to have this kind of dialogue about your work, when the hell else are you going to get something like that? This is a blast for me to be able to talk about this stuff, because which is why I will be here the next 2 times. Barring just because it's thrilling for me for people to invest their time, their passion in something that I've created. I mean, it's a gift. It's a gift. So.
And there was this whole thing at the one time about, should authors engage with their audiences, or should they keep like a respectful distance and all that stuff? As like, when I become a writer, like, I want to talk with people about it. I want to tease things. I want to like see what they think. I want to hear them tell me this is their favorite character, and like tell me why that's their favorite character. I want them to make predictions. Like that's the value. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like good. Like, my brother doesn't even like my book, so like, I'm going to keep writing it anyway. But like, my point is like, I 100% understand where you're coming from, like that, like, because when you're writing it, you're by yourself, and you're trying to like express yourself, and you're working on your prose, and your has the story, does it make sense, or do I need to change this part? Like, it's only by yourself, and then you get feedback here, negative, positive, you pick and choose which, and then I've got some like great feedback from someone that only reads YA, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then, talking about getting positive feedback, it's great to hear. But now and again, you'll get something like Sarah Chorn is self-published fantasy author and also has a review blog, and she really liked Taking God, and her review was just music to my ears, because it was one of those reviews that said yes, she got exactly what I was going for, right? And not every reader is going to be like that. There are other people who've read it where they didn't quite get what I was going for, what my intention was, but they enjoyed it. Cool. But Sarah's review it was like, oh my God, it's like, yes, this is exactly what I intended, and it's beautiful when that happens. So one other thing I wanted to comment on about what you said, you said it a couple times, Epic, and the idea of when you become a writer, dude, you're already a writer. Right.
Thank
and
you.
it's that it's not, I haven't read any of your stuff. Right. So it's not like I can comment on if it's something that resonates for me, but you are writing. Therefore, you are a writer. The idea that somehow someone else needs to validate that for us is bullshit. If you want to create, you work on your craft, you write. You work on your craft. Hopefully, the idea is I don't stop growing until they put me in the ground. That I am going to learn and become a more interesting, better person as I go, and I hopefully my writing improves and from book to book. But you're already a writer, dude.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I appreciate that so much. Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you, Brandon.
Well said, Mike. And thanks, Victor and Brandon, for watching. So Epic, now that Mike's going to try and make the next one, you're hosting the next one, right?
Sure.
Fair
I'll
game,
host
right?
it.
Yeah.
I'll host the next one.
Okay.
Epic's going to be hosting the next one.
Hopefully, I have my review for the first one. I would like to know your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
But
Let
like,
me know.
I'm because I want you to see the animation. I'm learning some really crazy stuff with animation right now, trial and error. But like, yeah, I feel like by the time I get to Aching God, my skill level will be something else. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll punch this up again. Talking about self-published writers absolutely depend on word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Some do some advertising. I do zero advertising. I don't do any paid advertising. Now and again, I'll do a sale. But for the most part, all the traffic that gets driven in my direction is from readers saying, I dig this. And so if you like something that someone has written, traditional or self-published, shout it from the mountaintops. Write do ratings, write a review at Amazon, at Goodreads, post something on Our Fantasy. Your people's mileage vary, but I've found that when I see an uptick in sales when someone posts something to Our Fantasy, they dug it. They post, hey, people read this book. And it's like, sometimes I'll be looking at my book report, which is an app for tracking sales for on Amazon. And I'll see, oh, wow, what's happening today? And sure enough, I'll find that someone posted a review somewhere and people are responding to that. So that's definitely a way to kind of influence what's being read by whom and what word is getting out. Writers depend on readers. How's that for a bit of wisdom?
Okay. Well, I hope you see an uptick. And for anyone who is thinking about getting the paperback version, because I read the Kindle Unlimited version while I was at work when I should have been working, and I have this book at home, so I don't,
Well, you hope you weren't an air traffic controller or anything like that, Steve.
No, it was during my lunch break, but yeah, but it's a great physical copy. So anyone who is thinking about getting the physical copy, the cover and the stock and everything is perfect. I didn't worry about creasing the spine because I'm weird about that kind of stuff. So anyone who's thinking about getting it, it's a fantastic, sturdy paperback copy.
So my policy with like hardcover books, like paperback, is I buy the Kindle version, like, and then if I like it, if I feel like this is something I can reread, then I buy the paperback, and then when I'm reading it, I enjoy it like I'm reading like I enjoy it like how it was the old school way,
I
So I'm
strongly
definitely gonna
support.
buy it.
I strongly support buying multiple versions of the same.
Yeah.
uh,
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike, for coming to chat with us, and I hope you can make the next two. It's been a blast. It's always fun talking to you. And always fun talking
Truly
to
my
Epic.
pleasure, guys.
And Epic,
Thanks
you'll
for
be the
everyone
host.
else here.
Yeah, thanks for everyone who joined us in the chat and came. And I'm guessing Epic, I can probably guess what your score for this one was, but if you want to
Yeah,
give your final thoughts.
100%. 100%. Like for me, this is like it is right up there with Blood Song. And I like this one as I
That's high
like
praise.
this high praise, high praise, high praise. And like I really like this book specifically. Um the one thing that I feel like is different from Blood Song in terms of the quality of like the characters and like uh, things, something that made me enjoy this book a little bit extra is like the prose. The prose is compact, it's neat, and it's kind of it has that flowery element, not so much that you feel like, oh, this guy is trying to show off that he's a writer, or this guy is like he's overdoing it, but just enough that it rolls off like as you read it, it settles in the mind very calm. It's like, so I really enjoyed it. This is another level of writing, and yeah, like highly recommend.
Thank you.
It blows me away that this is your first novel. I can't believe this is the first book. It's crazy.
Like this
And
is
yeah, it's crazy.
this
And
is
it's
what I
like
want to
Epic
do.
said. Yeah, like Epic said, it's really smooth from front to back. Really flows, and people say it's easy to read, and it almost sounds like an insult sometimes, but it was really easy to read. It's really smooth from front to back. And for me, the first 85% or whatever the percentage was, it felt like a roller coaster going up. And you're going to come. And I almost didn't want them to get there because of the buildup. So when we
Yes.
got there, I noticed my palms were sweaty, and my heart rate was getting faster. So I thought I loved it. I know some people don't agree, but it's
the
one of my
book
favorite parts.
the book has no problem with the pacing at all, as far as I'm concerned, because
No.
it needed to. I felt like I don't know, when I read the last 85, like the necessity of everything before the 85 like was very obvious to me, you know. So like it for me, because like it's kind of like a build up. By the time they get to the Barrowlands, you're like on edge. You're like, holy shit. Like, when they got there, like the walls were kind of like expanding. It wasn't quite what like they were told initially. I was just like, holy shit, so these guys have no context. Holy shit, what is gonna happen? And a character had already died at that point, so I started making. I was like, "Shit, who is going to die next?" you know. So like, by the time I got to the bar, by the time I got to the Barrowlands, I was exactly where I feel like you wanted me to be, like in kind of like respecting and fearing the Barrowland, like, oh shit, they are in it now, And I was there, and I really appreciated that.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic work.
Thank you.
So thanks again, Epic and Mike, for coming by today, and thanks everyone in the chat for coming to chat with us. And we'll see you. Anyone who wants to join the live discussion next month, or actually this month, just in a few weeks, let us know, and we'll try and get you set up and join us to chat about Sin Eater. So thanks again, everybody, and have a
Stay
good
epic.
weekend.